The second round of the 2022 NBA playoffs starts today, and the matchup that I think is going to be the most entertaining is the one between the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies. And while the vast majority of the NBA community has the Warriors winning this series, I'm going to pick the Grizzlies here, and even though they are the higher seed, this would definitely be an upset. But basically throughout today's video, I'm going to be going through 5 different reasons why I think Memphis can take this series versus the Warriors. The season series this year, Memphis went 3-1 against the Golden State Warriors, plus the fact that last year they beat them in a very clutch game. They showed that in a clutch and playoff type of environment, they can beat this team as well. They beat them in that play-in game to get the 8 seed last season, and overall I still think the Memphis Grizzlies have what it takes to beat the Golden State Warriors. This is going to be a very entertaining series, and ultimately I think Memphis is going to win this series in 7 games, and it's going to go to the distance. But I definitely think the Grizzlies can compete with the Warriors, and ultimately I think they're going to come out on top. And like I said, I'm going to be giving you guys 5 reasons today why I think this is the case. So let's get into the analysis. The first reason I want to discuss is I think that the Memphis Grizzlies style of offense, the way that they play offensively, will match up well against the Warriors defense. Memphis is a great offensive team that had the 4th best offensive rating in the league this year. The Warriors are an incredible defensive team, as they've always been. They had the 2nd best defensive rating in the NBA this season. But the thing about the Grizzlies offense is that they're able to hit shots that other teams aren't, and that the Warriors are willing to live with. For example, the Memphis Grizzlies, it's been kind of a little side narrative this year that they are the best team at the NBA at shooting that little floater shot. Not exactly a shot right at the rim or a mid-range, but kind of in between in the middle of the paint. Players like Morant have a really great floater, and another guy, a role player off the bench like Brandon Clark, he went off last series, and his go-to shot is that little soft touch floater in the paint. Other guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Dillon Brooks like to hit the shot, and the Grizzlies overall do a great job of hitting that little shot inside the paint and getting to their spots offensively, and also moving the ball well on the perimeter and being a pretty good 3-point shooting team as well. And the thing about the Warriors is that they're a great rotating defensive team. They have great communication led by Draymond Green. They could be able to have some good perimeter defense in this series and guard around the rim pretty well like they always do, but I'm just worried about that floater shot and that shot that the Grizzlies love to live with. And I know it's something very specific, but I think the Warriors defense could get killed by this in this series by the Memphis Grizzlies, specifically players like Ja and Brandon Clark just living in that area. And we've seen throughout the matchups between these two teams this year and in the play-in game last year how the Grizzlies were able to dominate the Warriors defense much more than other teams have because of that little shot. So I know it's something very specific, but floating shooting by the Memphis Grizzlies is going to be a huge key. It's how they've scored a lot of their points this year. They've lived and died with that shot, but I think it's going to work especially really well against a defense like the Warriors, and that could be a weakness for their defense. And on the flip side, on the other side of the floor, this is my second reason here. I think that the Grizzlies style of defense actually also matches up well against the Warriors style of offense. We know that the Warriors offense has been dominating the league for a long time now. It's been on and off with injuries, and we all know the history of the Warriors, but when they were winning their championships, their offense was obviously incredible. The best shooting backcourt of all time in Steph and Clay, anchored by Draymond Green, a great playmaker. Now they've added Jordan Poole, who's another great shooter and cutter, and they dominated the first round against the Denver Nuggets. But the harsh truth is that this Warriors offense isn't exactly the same as it used to be. In this regular season, they actually had a middle-of-the-pack offense, ranking 16th in the league in offensive rating. The shooting percentages of both Curry and Clay went down a little bit, and I wouldn't say they're as energetic as an offense as they used to be. While it's still electric, they're not exactly the same, and I think that the Grizzlies style of defense, how they're able to be a very active and energetic defensive team who led the league in steals this year in the regular season, leading the second place Raptors by a whole steal per game. I think that's going to match up well against the moving and cutting and shooting offense of the Golden State Warriors. I also think that a player like Dillon Brooks, who we've seen him be matched up against Steph Curry in the past, he's going to have a tough task series, but he's a very good competitor. I think he's going to be able to, when Steph and Clay are moving off the ball, he can be a very good factor for the Grizzlies, trying to stay with them off the ball. And the Grizzlies also just overall have a lot of great energetic defenders that are going to be willing to do that and just get their hands in the way and get a lot of deflections and really disrupt this offense of the Warriors. Like I said, this is still a very dynamic offense, and we saw that firsthand in the first round for the Warriors against the Denver Nuggets. But at the same time, the Nuggets also have one of the worst defenses in the league. Like I said, the Grizzlies have a very energetic defense. They rank 6th in the NBA this year in defensive rating in the regular season. They had a good defensive first round against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they, like I said, they by far led the league in steals this year, which is going to cause some problems for the Warriors as well. So while this Warriors offense is still definitely dynamic and fun to watch, I wouldn't be surprised if the Grizzlies can cause some problems for them throughout this series. The third reason I think the Grizzlies will win this series is they have a big advantage in transition play. And I think in the playoffs, transition is as important as ever. Getting out in transition, getting easy baskets off of your defense can really change the momentum of the game, change the energy, and change the mentality of all of the players on the court. And the Memphis Grizzlies in both the regular season and the playoffs led the league in transition points per game. And while their percentile in the league won't exactly show that because they don't get as many points per possession in transition, getting out in transition the most frequent is actually more important in my opinion, because it doesn't even matter how efficiently you're scoring in transition if you're scoring more efficiently than you usually do with your set offense, which pretty much every team does, including the Grizzlies. When you get out in transition, you have an advantage, and there's no doubt about that. And because the Grizzlies get so many steals and have an energetic defense, getting a lot of steals and deflections, they're able to get out in transition a lot of the time, and they're a very electric and energetic team in transition as well. It's all led by the playmaking of Morant, the shooters that they have on this team. When Ja's able to drive and kick it out to some of the amazing shooters on this team, like Desmond Bane, for example, they're able to get some pretty easy baskets there. And they're also, like I said, a great team around the rim and the paint, and they're able to get easy baskets there as well and finish around the rim electrically at times. And while the Warriors have a great set defense, this is another way that the Grizzlies offense can beat the Golden State Warriors defense, is if they're able to get out in transition before the Warriors can set up their defense, because of course that's when they're at their best. And then in transition the other way, the Warriors going the other way, they're pretty much an average team when it comes to transition. They're 18th in the NBA in points in transition. They're better more in their set offense, which, like I mentioned in my last reason, I think the Grizzlies could cause some problems for them there. So getting out in transition on both sides of the floor, I think this could be a big momentum shifter in this series, a really key factor, and the Grizzlies have another big advantage here. The fourth reason I wanted to discuss, and another advantage that I think the Grizzlies have in this series, is their depth. And while the Golden State Warriors obviously have a very dynamic team overall on both ends of the floor, I don't know if their players off of the bench can provide enough for them in this series that they're going to need to. Like I've already discussed, the Grizzlies are going to cause some major problems for the Warriors in this series on both ends of the floor and potentially in transition. And if the Warriors have to rely on their starting five, that's going to be very difficult. They do have some players off of the bench like Gary Payton II, who in especially the closing game of that series against the Nuggets, he showed out on both ends of the floor for sure. They have a player like Otto Porter Jr., but I mean, other than this, if we're being realistic, the depth on this Warriors team is not great and not nearly what it used to be in their glory days from 2015 to 2018. And meanwhile, on the other side of the court here with the Memphis Grizzlies, they have almost as good a starting five as the Warriors, probably a little bit worse overall. But if we look at their depth, they have one of the best, if not the very best role player in the league in Brandon Clark. I think he is extremely underrated. What he's done in the playoffs this year has been incredible. He's got a lot of efficient baskets in the paint. He's done an incredible job of playing his role offensively, getting those buckets in the paint, those little floaters, and being a good switchable defender. And then off the bench, they have a couple backup point guards that can provide some good playmaking, shooting, like D'Anthony Melton and Tyus Jones, who especially down the stretch in the closing game against the Timberwolves, a guy like Tyus Jones was great. Kyle Anderson, who can provide some good things on both ends of the floor, a young big man like Xavier Tillman, and overall we're looking at like a 10-man deep roster for the Grizzlies here, whereas the Warriors, in my opinion, won't be able to match that nearly as effectively. And I know that overall in the playoffs, depth is, if we're being for real, not that much as important as it is in the regular season, because your starters are going to be getting the vast majority of the minutes anyway. But in a very close series like this, the play of your bench players and your depth players, your 8, 9, and 10 guys coming off of the bench, could be very crucial. Those buckets that they get at the start of the second quarter, the start of the fourth quarter, those can determine the difference in these type of games in the playoffs, and I think the Grizzlies definitely have another advantage here. And the last reason I wanted to discuss is a very simple one, and it's how good I really think Ja Morant is going to be in the series. I think this guy, we know that he had an MVP caliber season this year. He won the most improved player, and I think that he could come into this series and legitimately be the best player in this series. Yes, I said that. He could be better than Steph Curry throughout this series. I think he's just that good. And even though he was clutch at times in that series against the Timberwolves, he hit a game winner, he had the dunk of the year. Overall, he didn't have that great of a series because he was matched up against Patrick Beverley, who overall caused some big problems for him. But in a couple of those games after Pat Bev fouled out, Ja started going off, and we've seen how good he can be in the clutch. And in his one of his first playoffs this season, and the first playoff win in a series that he's ever had, he's shown that even though he can be struggling at times matched up against a defender like Pat Bev, he can be very clutch, and he just has that clutch factor down the stretch in games. He hit that athletic game winner. He's able to deliver down the stretch in games, and we're definitely going to see this continue in the series against the Warriors. In the play-in game last year against the Warriors, Ja was the best player in that game. He was very clutch. He got buckets down the stretch, and I think he can be that same player in this series as well. In the regular season this year, Ja averaged over 27 points per game on over 49% from the field, over 34% from 3, a very improved jump shot for him, almost 7 assists per game. And I think that in this series against the Warriors, we've seen how he has succeeded in the past and the recent history against the Warriors, and I think he's going to put up these numbers that he put up in the regular season, if not better, and potentially be the best player in this series. Like I said at the start of the video, even though Memphis is the 2 seed and the Warriors are the 3 seed, the vast majority of the NBA community has the Warriors winning this series, and it would be considered an upset if the Grizzlies do win the series and move on to the Western Conference Finals. But because of everything that I discussed today and how high I am on the Memphis Grizzlies, I think that they are going to take this series over the Golden State Warriors in either 6 or 7 games. This is going to be a very entertaining series. I'm going to try not to miss any games in this series because it's going to be very fun to watch. But again, because of the reasons that I discussed in today's video, I think that the Memphis Grizzlies will beat the Golden State Warriors in this series and move on to the West Finals. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment down below your prediction for the series between the Warriors and the Grizzlies, and I'll see you all next video.